The 3-ton elephant appeared at the sanctuary gates just after dawn, her massive silhouette unmistakable against the African sunrise. The security guard rubbed his eyes, certain he was seeing things. But there she was, standing perfectly still, her trunk raised toward the main building as if she could smell something or someone she'd been searching for. Dr. Marcus Chen was in his office reviewing medical charts when his radio crackled to life. "Doc, you need to see this. Now." The urgency in the guard's voice made Marcus drop everything and sprint toward the entrance. He'd worked at the Kigoma Wildlife Sanctuary in Tanzania for 15 years, and he'd learned that urgency usually meant trouble. But what he saw when he reached the gates stopped him cold. "Maya," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The elephant's ears flared forward at the sound, and she released a deep, rumbling call that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath his feet. It was a sound Marcus hadn't heard in 5 years, a sound he'd convinced himself he'd never hear again. Maya had come home. To understand why this moment shattered every assumption Marcus held about animal memory and emotion, you have to go back 10 years. Back to a night when a young veterinarian received a call that would change his life forever. Marcus had been in Tanzania for only 6 months when the emergency came through. A juvenile elephant, approximately 8 years old, had been found in a poacher's snare 3 miles from the sanctuary. The wire had cut deep into her front right leg, nearly severing the tendons. The local rangers who discovered her said she'd likely been trapped for days, unable to call for help, slowly dying of dehydration and infection. "She won't make it," his colleague Sarah said flatly as they loaded the sedated elephant into their transport vehicle. "The damage is too extensive. Even if we save the leg, she'll never walk properly, and an elephant that can't keep up with the herd." She didn't need to finish the sentence. In the wild, an elephant that couldn't migrate with its family was a dead elephant. But something about the young elephant's eyes when they'd first found her, the way she'd looked directly at Marcus, not with fear but with something that felt almost like trust, made him refuse to give up. They worked on her for 11 hours straight that first night. Marcus carefully debrided the infected tissue, reconstructed the damaged tendons as best he could, and prayed to whatever powers might be listening that his limited surgical skills would be enough. Sarah assisted, though she made it clear she thought they were wasting precious resources on a lost cause. The elephant crashed twice during surgery. Twice, Marcus brought her back. When it was over, when the young elephant's leg was bandaged and her vitals were finally stable, Marcus collapsed in a chair beside her recovery pen. The sanctuary's director, an older Tanzanian man named Bahati, brought him coffee and stood watching the sleeping elephant with an unreadable expression. "You know she cannot stay here forever," Bahati said quietly. "Our mission is rehabilitation and release. We are not a zoo." "I know," Marcus replied, "but first, she has to survive. Then she has to learn to walk again. Then you will have to let her go," Bahati finished. "Even though it will break your heart, especially because it will break your heart. That is the job we have chosen, Dr. Chen." Marcus named her Maya after his grandmother who had raised him in San Francisco after his parents died. His grandmother had believed in fighting impossible odds. She'd believed in never giving up on the wounded. Looking at the unconscious elephant, Marcus thought the name fit. The first 3 months were hell. Maya's leg became infected despite the antibiotics. She developed a fever that spiked to dangerous levels. She refused to eat. She wouldn't put any weight on the injured leg, which meant the muscles began to atrophy, which meant even if the leg healed, she might never use it properly again. Marcus practically moved into her enclosure. He'd arrive before sunrise and leave long after dark. He hand-fed her. He changed her bandages twice a day. He massaged her leg, talking to her constantly in a mix of English and Mandarin, telling her about his grandmother, about San Francisco, about how she had to fight because the world needed more fighters like her. Sarah thought he was losing it. "You're getting too attached," she warned. "This is dangerous, Marcus, for you and for her." But Marcus couldn't help it. There was something about Maya, the way she'd watch him with those impossibly intelligent eyes, the way she'd rest her trunk on his shoulder while he worked, the gentle rumble she'd make when he arrived each morning. It felt less like doctor and patient and more like family. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning in November. Marcus arrived to find Maya standing, really standing, with weight on all four legs at the gate of her enclosure. Her trunk reached toward him, and she made a sound he'd never heard before. Not distress, not pain, something that sounded almost like joy. "Good girl," Marcus breathed, tears streaming down his face as he approached her. "You beautiful, stubborn, incredible girl." From that day forward, Maya's recovery accelerated. She began eating normally. The infection finally cleared. Within 3 months, she was walking without a limp. Within 6 months, she was running. The leg that everyone said would never heal had healed. The elephant everyone said wouldn't survive was thriving. But with recovery came a new challenge. What next? Maya had been separated from her herd for too long. They'd moved on, probably hundreds of miles away by now, following the seasonal migration patterns. Releasing her alone would be a death sentence. She needed to be integrated into a new family group. It took 2 more years of careful preparation. They slowly introduced Maya to other rescued elephants at the sanctuary, helping her learn the social structures and communication patterns she'd missed during her recovery. She formed bonds, particularly with an older matriarch named Zawadi, who seemed to take the younger elephant under her wing. Marcus watched it all with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. Every step Maya took toward independence was a step away from him. The day finally came when Bahati announced that Maya was ready. A small herd of rehabilitated elephants, including Zawadi, would be released into the Tarangire National Park. It was time. Marcus spent the last night before transport sleeping in a chair outside Maya's enclosure, just like he'd done during those first dark months. Maya stood at the fence, her trunk occasionally reaching through to touch his face, as if she knew something was about to change. "You're going to have an amazing life," Marcus told her, his voice thick. "You're going to have a family, real family. That's what you deserve." Maya rumbled softly, the sound vibrating through the night air. The next morning, they loaded her and the others into the transport vehicles. Maya went willingly, which somehow made it harder. As the truck pulled away, she turned back once, her eyes finding Marcus in the crowd of staff. Then she faced forward, toward her future. Sarah found Marcus an hour later, sitting in the empty enclosure where Maya had spent the last 3 years. "You did it," she said simply. "You saved her. You gave her back her life." "Then why does it feel like I lost something?" Marcus asked. "Because you did," Sarah replied. "But that's the price of loving something enough to set it free." In the years that followed, Marcus threw himself into his work. He saved dozens more animals. He perfected new surgical techniques. He trained younger veterinarians. He rarely spoke about Maya, though he kept a photo of her on his desk, the one from her first day standing on all 4 legs, trunk raised in what he'd always believed was victory. Occasionally, researchers would send updates about the released elephants. Maya had successfully integrated into the wild population. She'd been spotted with various herds. She was healthy, thriving, living the life she was meant to live. But as the years passed, the updates became less frequent. The researchers had other elephants to track, other studies to conduct. Life moved on, until this morning. Now, standing at the sanctuary gates, staring at the massive elephant who had somehow found her way back, Marcus felt like all the air had been sucked from his lungs. "It can't be," Sarah said, appearing beside him. She'd heard the commotion and come running. "Marcus, that's impossible." Maya was released over 200 miles from here. She's been gone for 5 years. Elephants don't just... But Maya had already made her decision about what was and wasn't possible. The moment the guards opened the gates, she walked directly toward Marcus. Not rushing, not aggressive, just purposeful, determined. She stopped 3 feet away from him, so close he could feel the heat radiating from her massive body. Then, slowly, gently, she reached out her trunk and touched his face. The same gesture she'd made countless times during her recovery. The same gesture she'd made that last night before the transport. Marcus's hand moved almost of its own accord, reaching up to touch her trunk. "Maya," he said again, "I can't believe. How did you? Why did you?" Maya rumbled, that deep, resonant sound that seemed to come from the very core of her being. And then she stepped aside. That's when Marcus saw them. Behind Maya, partially hidden by her massive bulk, was a small elephant calf, maybe 6 months old, with oversized ears and wobbly legs that hadn't quite figured out how to work in coordination. The calf took a tentative step toward Marcus, then looked back at Maya as if asking permission. Maya rumbled again, softer this time, encouraging. Sarah's hand gripped Marcus's arm. "Oh my God," she whispered. The calf approached Marcus, sniffed him carefully, then in a gesture that was pure mimicry of its mother, reached out a tiny trunk to touch his hand. Marcus stood frozen, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. Maya hadn't just come home. She'd brought her child. She'd traveled over 200 miles through dangerous territory to bring her baby to. To what? To show him, to introduce them. Bahati arrived, slightly out of breath from running. The old man took one look at the scene, and his eyes filled with tears. "In all my years," he said quietly, "I have never seen anything like this." Marcus slowly approached the calf, keeping his movements gentle and predictable. Maya watched, but didn't intervene. Up close, Marcus could see the calf was healthy, bright eyes, glossy skin, strong legs despite their wobbliness. Maya had taken good care of her. "Her," Marcus said suddenly, realizing. "It's a girl." As if in response, the calf made a small trumpeting sound, high-pitched and endearing. Maya rumbled approvingly. Over the next hour, staff gathered to witness the unprecedented scene. Maya seemed completely at ease, allowing her calf to explore the sanctuary grounds while she stayed close to Marcus. The calf was curious about everything, sniffing equipment, investigating buildings, attempting to grab things with a trunk that didn't quite obey her commands yet. Dr. Sarah Thompson, the veterinarian who'd once declared Maya a lost cause, stood watching with tears streaming down her face. "They don't do this," she kept saying. "Elephants don't come back. Not like this. Not with their young." But Maya clearly hadn't read the scientific literature on elephant behavior. As the morning progressed, it became clear that Maya wasn't just visiting. She wasn't lost or confused or seeking help. She was here with a purpose. The urgency in the guard's voice made Marcus drop everything and sprint toward the entrance. He'd worked at the Kigoma Wildlife Sanctuary in Tanzania for 15 years, and he'd learned that urgency usually meant trouble. But what he saw when he reached the gates stopped him cold. "Maya," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The elephant's ears flared forward at the sound, and she released a deep, rumbling call that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath his feet. A juvenile elephant, approximately 8 years old, had been found in a poacher's snare 3 miles from the sanctuary. The wire had cut deep into her front right leg, nearly severing the tendons. The local rangers who discovered her said she'd likely been trapped for days, unable to call for help, slowly dying of dehydration and infection. "She won't make it," his colleague Sarah said flatly as they loaded the sedated elephant into their transport vehicle. "The damage is too extensive." The calf moved closer to Marcus, and Maya rumbled again. It hit Marcus then what was happening. Maya wasn't asking for help. She wasn't seeking medical care. She was showing him. She was saying, "Look what I did. Look what I became. You saved me, and I want you to see that your faith wasn't wasted." "Thank you," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. "Thank you for coming back. Thank you for showing me." They stayed for 3 days. 3 days during which Maya reacquainted herself with the sanctuary, showing her calf the places she'd once called home. She showed her the enclosure where she'd recovered, the waterhole where she'd learned to play again, the path she'd walked every day during her rehabilitation. And every evening, as the sun set over the African savannah, Maya would bring her calf to where Marcus sat, and they would spend an hour together. No agenda, no purpose beyond presence. Just a human and 2 elephants, connected by a bond that defied explanation. On the 3rd night, Bahati joined Marcus. "She will leave soon," the older man said. "She has a life to live, a calf to raise." This was closure for both of you. "I know," Marcus replied. "But you will never forget," Bahati continued. And neither will she. That is the gift you gave each other, a memory that transcends time and distance. A proof that love, even between species, is real and lasting. On the morning of the fourth day, Marcus woke to find Maya and her calf at the sanctuary gates, facing outward, toward the wild, toward home. He walked over slowly, Sarah following behind him. Other staff members emerged from their quarters, sensing that this was goodbye. Marcus approached Maya one last time. He placed his hand on her trunk, feeling the warm, rough skin that he'd once bandaged and healed. "Be safe," he told her. "Take care of your girl. Live a long, full life." Maya wrapped her trunk around his arm, a gentle squeeze that lasted just a moment. Then she touched his face one more time, the same gesture she'd made when they first met, when she was dying in a poacher's snare, and he'd looked into her eyes and promised to save her. He'd kept that promise, and now she'd kept hers to survive, to thrive, to come back and show him that his sacrifice hadn't been in vain. Maya turned toward her calf and made a low, rumbling call. The calf responded, and together they began walking away from the sanctuary, toward the horizon, toward the life waiting for them in the wild. Marcus stood at the gates, watching until they disappeared into the landscape. He was crying openly now, but for the first time since he'd said goodbye 5 years ago, they weren't tears of loss. They were tears of gratitude. Sarah stood beside him, her own face wet with tears. "That," she said softly, "is why we do this impossible job. For moments like that. For proof that what we do matters." Marcus nodded, unable to speak. Behind them, Bahati spoke from the doorway. "There is a young leopard in the medical wing," he said gently. "She was hit by a vehicle last night. She needs a doctor who doesn't give up. A doctor who believes in fighting impossible odds." Marcus turned to look at the old man, then back at the horizon where Maya had disappeared. "I'm on my way," he said, because that's what Maya had taught him all those years ago and again now, that healing is possible, that bonds forged in moments of desperation can last a lifetime, that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't keeping them close, it's setting them free and trusting that love will bring them back, even if only for a moment, to show you that everything you sacrificed was worth it. Maya never returned to the sanctuary again. But 7 years later, a young researcher conducting an elephant population study in Tarunjaya National Park sent Marcus a video. It showed Maya, now fully mature, with 3 calves, the one Marcus had met, now a confident young elephant, plus 2 younger ones. The video captured something remarkable. When the researcher's vehicle approached, Maya's first calf, the one she'd brought to the sanctuary all those years ago, stepped forward protectively. But Maya rumbled, and the young elephant relaxed. The researcher's notes explained, "Subject Maya appears to have taught her offspring to recognize and trust human researchers. This is unusual behavior in wild elephants and suggests learned trust being passed generationally." Marcus watched the video 7 times that night. Then he emailed the researcher back, "That's my girl, she's passing it forward." He kept the video on his phone. On hard days when an animal died despite his best efforts, when the weight of loss felt too heavy, he'd watch it. He'd see Maya alive and thriving with a family of her own. He'd see her teaching her children that not all humans were dangerous, that some could be trusted, that sometimes when you're wounded and afraid, help might come from unexpected places. It was Maya's final gift to him, the knowledge that healing ripples outward in ways we can never fully measure, touching lives we'll never meet, creating legacies that last long after we're gone. And on quiet nights, when Marcus sat in his office reviewing charts and planning surgeries, when the weight of impossible cases threatened to crush him, he'd look at that old photo, Maya, standing on all 4 legs for the first time, trunk raised in victory, and remember that love, real love, doesn't end when someone walks away. It transforms, it grows. It comes back in unexpected ways in the form of a 3-ton elephant who traveled 200 miles just to say, "I remember you, I'm okay, thank you." And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything.